underdogs, underestimated, we the ones.
It's the Underdogs, back with you. Jordan Brenner here. Peter Keating joining me as always. What's up, Pete?
How's it going? I don't think you can smell autumn in the air yet, but you can start to smell pigskin, can you?
As long as I'm not smelling you, I'm good. But yes, we've got a lot of football to talk about. Some early Heisman picks to get you ready for college football. Obviously, to stay with the theme of the show, long shot picks. We've got some very, very cool NFL research about what it takes to win. A little bit of a surprise that you might not have realized that's the tease. And then a crazy story of perhaps gambling gone too far. We'll let you be the judge.
Oh, Jordan, what are you betting on now, Jordan? I don't want to. Do I want to know?
If only it were me. But Pete, let's get right into Heisman talk. Okay, so biggest award in sports, fair to say, Heisman Trophy. So you can bet on it. And I was thinking, all right, let's do a little research to figure out what long shots may emerge, what trends there are. So we looked at the last 10 years and the players who finished in the top 5 in the voting. And what was interesting to me, and I'm curious if you thought the same thing, was that I actually thought it was going to be a really, really tight list of criteria of what led to a Heisman winner. And I found that there were more routes to being in contention or actually winning the trophy than expected. You agree with that?
Yeah, part of it is that anytime you look at a group of top contenders as opposed to the ultimate winner, you start to see different factors emerge. And in we looked at the top 5 Heisman finishers for the past 10 years. When you do that, it's not just quarterbacks. It's not just national champions. There's other stuff floating around there too. I mean, beginning with, it's not just quarterbacks. I mean, we've seen defensive linemen win recently. We've seen how many wide receivers? 1 in the past 10 years, but it's not just all national champion predictable quarterbacks. There's some interesting other factors. Yes, I'd agree with that.
Yeah. So here are a couple lessons learned, and then we can close this out with some long shot picks that you can bet on. But so first off, you're just looking at the top 5 each year. The one thing is that does stand out is you really do need to be from a good team. Virtually everyone, especially in the last 5 years or so, who made it to who finished in the top 5 in the Heisman voting was from a top 10, if not top 15 team. Now, what's interesting there is that doesn't mean that they started the season with those expectations. In the past 2 years alone, 4 of the 10 guys who were top 5 finishers in the Heisman were on teams that were unranked in the preseason. And half of them, 5 of 10, finished the previous year unranked. So that ties in really nicely to a show we'll do later this summer on finding long shot teams. But if you can successfully identify a team that's going to come out of nowhere, I think that's a fun way to kind of pick a Heisman candidate too. Who's the driving force behind that, right?
Right. Now, let's throw in a couple of wrinkles. It helps to be from a power conference team, but it's not absolutely necessary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if a team is like what you're talking about, a team that comes out of nowhere, does really well, gets national visibility, gets promotion for its players, is obviously sparked by one great player like TCU, right? But also in the past, there have been other examples of that. Keenan Reynolds finished 5th one year coming out of Navy. I mean, that's an exception, but it doesn't have to be a huge program. It has to be a good team. The other thing that I found interesting was it doesn't necessarily have to be a team that has done better than the previous year or, improved from 9 to 2 in the rankings. It just has to be a team having a really great season. I think more than anything, that's related to media exposure. I think the number of times people see a great player leading a really good visible team, a lot of other stuff fades into the background. I really think it's that simple.
Well, right. Look, you mentioned TCU last year, right? And Max Duggan finished 2nd in the Heisman voting. That's after finishing the previous season unranked, starting last year unranked, and then moving all the way up to number 3 at the time of the Heisman. So it's not like Max Duggan came in off a massive statistical season. He'd, thrown for a little over 2,000 yards and 16 touchdowns the year before. So the point is you can make up a lot of ground as long as your team is good. The other aspect to that is you don't have to have a track record with that team, especially now in the transfer portal. I would have thought coming in that, oh, it's someone who already has a built-in narrative that this is their year, this is their time. Well, we've seen last year winner Caleb Williams was a transfer. We've had other transfers do very well. We've had going back all the way to Jameis Winston as a freshman winning it. And you see, by contrast, the guys who were were defending Heisman winners. It's a really high bar to win it again. And they have not been in the mix, whether that was a Jameis Winston or a Johnny Manziel or Deshaun Watson. Like, when you want to anoint those guys as a foregone conclusion, and so you're looking sort of a Caleb Williams again, who's looking to repeat. It's not so easy.
Look, part of that is because it's almost impossible to be the very best player in the country, head and shoulders above anyone else 2 years in a row. Part of it's, it's just regression to the mean. Part of it is that these guys sometimes go to the NFL, but it's very true. There is no such thing as a foregone conclusion. Even if you're a returning Heisman winner, that's not that big a plus by itself in winning for a second year in a row.
Now, when you narrow it down to just the last 10 winners, it does condense a little bit. 8 of the 10 have been quarterbacks. The only 2 were Derrick Henry in 2015, running back at Alabama, and then another Alabama player, Devontae Smith, in 2020 as a wide receiver. Otherwise, it's been a lot of quarterbacks, but it's really varied in terms of, there's only 3 seniors in the mix. There's 3 juniors. There's 3 sophomores and a freshman. So you can be any class. I will say that all the winners started the preseason rank. 7 of the 10 were top 10. There was an 11, a 14, and a 19 in the mix, and all were on good teams, top 10 teams. The only guy outside of the top 10 at the time of the voting was Lamar Jackson. Louisville was ranked 15th in 2016. So that's instructive. So if you're looking to pick a winner, you got to figure out what team's going to be really good and generally who the quarterback of that is. But I don't think you're restricted on guys who were really good the year before. And with that in mind, can I give my first pick, Peter?
Sure.
All right.
I'll let you go first.
We mentioned that transfers are not disqualifying. We mentioned narratives matter, teams improving. So I'm looking at Sam Hartman at plus 1,600, coming from Wake Forest, Notre Dame as the new quarterback. They're a preseason top 15 team in the coaches poll. You can see them rising. If Notre Dame has a magical season, which is within the range of outcomes, it's going to be Hartman driving it, and a lot of talk about that move. So I think there's real value in him at plus 1,600.
All right, I can see that. I got nothing to argue with about that. Plus 1,600.
Nothing?
Plus 1,600 is interesting. It seems like there are a few guys who are in that range, which are not close to being favorites, but other than Caleb Williams, I guess there is no favorite, right? I mean,
right. We're making a non-Caleb Williams pick. He's right. plus 550.
And there's not a gaggle of guys around plus 400 or 500 or 600. There's guys in that range. So, if you're going to go safe, I guess that's a good pick.
All right. Well, I'll save my next one. But with your first pick in the Heisman long shot draft, who are you taking?
Talking about narratives and transfers, how about a 6th-year senior? I'm talking about Joe Milton, Tennessee. I mean, look, he spent 3 years at Michigan. This is going to be his 3rd year at Tennessee. Jordan, sometimes, we haven't even talked about the nitty-gritty of analytics about all this, but sometimes numbers are so huge, they essentially can't be lying, okay? This is the guy taking over for Hendon Hooker. So the offense and the scheme and the coaching are there for him to open it up if he can, and boy, can he. Jordan, last year, 14.3 average adjusted yards per attempt, 10 touchdowns, no interceptions on only 82 passes. In limited time, Joe Milton had a passer rating of 204. So look, this team is going to stay really good. It's going to score a ton of points, and you're going to see someone step in, and your eyes are going to pop out when you watch this guy play for the first couple of times. And that's deep analytics, Jordan. He will be literally eye popping.
Literally.
But when you're talking about winning awards, that's kind of what you need. Like, he's going to start out with a good place, and then he's going to surprise people by being even better. And so he's plus 2,500. I think that's tremendous value.
All right. Well, let's speaking of eye popping, that nice segue to my second pick. And we talked about 8 of the last 10 winners being quarterbacks. So the two who weren't were both on Alabama teams that were ranked first or second, put up jaw-dropping numbers. So you got to find someone who's going to be on a potentially great team, who's going to, put up insane numbers and have the narrative just being better. So here's a fun stat for you. Okay, in the year before Devontae Smith won the Heisman, he had 1,256 receiving yards and 14 touchdowns. Last year, a receiver on a really good team had 1,263 receiving yards and 14 touchdowns. And his name is Marvin Harrison Jr. He's also projected to be the number 1 pick potentially in some mock drafts. Ohio State's a top 5 preseason team. So he's the type of guy who could go 1,800 yards and 25 touchdowns and go nuts. The talk of him being a generational talent. I could totally see this narrative if Ohio State has a great season that Harrison's just the best player in the country and he wins at plus 2,000. I think those are good odds.
He's definitely the kind of guy that people will say, if you're going to give it to a wide receiver, X should win it, right? I mean, he's the guy who fits that mold. We don't need to have a quarterback this year because this guy's so much better than everyone. Sure.
Right. Is he just the most dominant player? All right, Peter, you got one last pick before we move on?
All right, I'm going to go long, and I mean long, like Joe Milton, a guy who can throw the ball 70 or 80 yards in the air. I'm going to go with a long shot at DJ Uiagalelei, the quarterback at Oregon State. Now look, will anybody from Oregon State win a Heisman? Maybe not so much according to our analysis here, although more teams from outside the usual suspects than we expected produced Heisman contenders. This is a team. It's gone from 2 wins 5 years ago to 10 wins last year. 2 of its 3 losses were by a combined 3 points. Okay. They get Utah and Washington at home this year. I don't think they play USC, but I have to see. I don't know how that's possible. But I think Oregon is a sneaky, not so sneaky. I think it's an excellent choice to win the Pac-12. While they're surprising people, this guy's going to step into an offense that is engineered to score tons of points. He's great on play action, which sets up these huge throws, which he's also great at. I'll stop there. I'm not going to give you tons of stats, except this. He's plus 9,000. That's pretty cool value for a guy you're going to see surprising you all across West Coast games in October and November.
I mean, if you want to go with an Oregon State quarterback, go for it. But I do reserve the right to, when we do our long shot team show in a couple weeks, when that research is done and there's a team I really love, I reserve the right to add a Heisman candidate at that time. But for now,
not the one that's not from Oregon State.
No, because Oregon State's not going to do anything. Peter, come
on. Oh, come on! They're going to win 11 games. I don't know. Are we still recording? Should I have said that?
On that note, let's move off the college game and into the pros.
And we're back with Underdogs. Jordan, we've spent a lot of this football preseason, NFL-wise, talking about how it's complicated to try to sort out the effects of offensive line play and running play, right? Whether we're looking at fantasy or real-life teams or running backs, we try to see what the different effects are of offensive line play, and it's not always that simple to figure out. But there's a really interesting piece of research I wanted to bring to your attention and talk about. We're going to look at this week, which is that there's this weak link theory of offensive line play that says the offensive line is only as good as its weakest link. Jordan, that theory is true. It makes a huge difference when all of a team's offensive linemen block well on any particular play, not just when 1 or 2 guys blow open a hole for a running back or a quarterback, okay? So research now shows that when 1 or more, just 1 guy or more, blows a play on an offensive line. In this case, we're looking at plays where 1 or more linemen got negative pro football focus grades, okay, in NFL games. Then all of a sudden, the success rate in the running game goes down by about half. The expected points of the play switch from positive to negative. There's about half a point expected difference between plays where they all working in tandem to do the right thing and when they're not. Jordan, that's an equivalent of about 2 rushing touchdowns a game if that happened on every play. It's amazing. And it's bigger for some running backs than others, and it's bigger for some teams than others. But the point is that it does not work if you have one superstar on your line. Let's say Laramie Tunsil, right? If one or more or three or more guys who are alongside him are going to not block well. In fact, it doesn't even work well when you have 3 or 4 guys on the line blocking well. If one guy is the weak link, the weak link in the NFL is very destructive. There are only a couple of teams that don't have any weak links at all. You can guess who they are. Philadelphia. Philadelphia has 5 great linemen. Kansas City, nobody's below average. Atlanta, Detroit, teams that are built around great running games don't have weak links because they basically never fail at that level.
So then tell me if I'm interpreting this right. If I'm looking for a team that's going to be maybe unexpectedly better on offense, I should probably be looking for a team that had one guy who really sucked last year and has the potential to at least be average or better in that spot this year. Am I thinking about this correctly?
That's right. If you have one hole and you can fill it, you can improve incredibly quickly. And
our producer Sarah says, shout out to Eric Flowers. Yes, that is the definition of a weak link.
Yes. And we are hoping, as you and I are here in the New York area, we're hoping that history does not repeat itself, because there's one team that fits that definition to a T, and it is the New York Giants. Look,
whoa,
there's some guys on the line you may not have heard of, like Mike Lewinsky, who were perfectly fine last year. There's one superstar, Andrew Thomas, who had a PFF grade of 90. And then there's Evan Neal, right? High draft pick, switched around his position, did not have a good year, gave up a lot of pressures, Jordan. He is the weak link, but right now he's the only weak link because they drafted John Michael Schmitz at center. And if he's anywhere near as good as his draft, he's a first round pick, probably the best center in the draft. If he's
second round pick.
Second round, I'm sorry, that's right. Still the best center in the draft, I think. Even better than that guy the Jets got, I think. But
yeah, you're known for evaluating centers.
But he's one of the 2 best centers in the draft. And if he's anywhere near that, then Evan Neal is the guy. And if he can just be average or decent, that line takes a huge leap forward, because there'll be a whole jump ahead in the number of plays where everybody's working together, nobody's blowing their assignments.
And then explain quickly why that could be especially meaningful for Saquon Barkley.
Well, let me mention, I will, but because the number is crazy. Some running backs do all right with bad blocking. Some need good blocking to succeed. And Saquon Barkley last year gained more than 12 yards a carry on plays where everybody blocked well. So if everybody does block well on more plays, the gains will be extra enormous for Saquon. I want to mention one other team though, Jordan, and that's Miami, because Miami has 3 very good offensive linemen, O'Neal, Darisaw. I'm sorry, that's Minnesota. Armstead, Williams, Hunt, right? But
are you just naming names here? Or are these real people?
No. Miami has 3 guys who are set to anchor
Washington,
their offensive line.
Smith.
But they're also playing Austin Jackson, who's kind of rounding into shape in this camp, and they signed Isaiah Wynn to back him up. But Jordan, they got Liam Eichelberg, former second-round pick, not having a good camp, PFF rating under 40 last year. That is the definition of a weak link. There's this it's kind of quiet, but it's right there. Problem that the Dolphins have to solve. And they could have drafted a lineman, but after signing Jalen Ramsey, they drafted a cornerback in the first round. So they've gone back to the dance with these guys again, and there's a weak link there. And if they solve it, Tua's going to find things much easier behind that line. But if they don't,
that's already a good offense. But I like
cause them problems.
Yeah, I like the idea of the Dolphins as an underdog, great offense, and the Giants as an underdog offense that could really step up. I see it. 2 things stood out to me briefly when in what you showed me too. First of all, is the fact that we know that we've talked a lot about the Falcons this offseason about being a surprise team, but just again the fact that there's no weak link on that offensive line. They're so run heavy anyway, and Bijan Robinson is a generational talent. I know we talked in our fantasy segment about this, but God, I could really see taking him as just the first running back overall. I know he's going like RB3 in a lot of drafts, but this guy could put up just insane numbers. The second thing is, and this makes me sick, the Eagles are doing something right. They really are. If they again, there's a line with no weak links, and then you look, they had a change at the running back position. A guy I already identify without this data as a potential sleeper fantasy back was Rashad Penny. And if you look at the numbers, he was a really good running back with not great blocking. He was gaining almost 4 yards a carry on runs that weren't perfectly blocked. And on runs that were perfectly blocked, he was right behind Saquon Barkley, almost 12 yards a carry. So you plug him into this line with Philly. Holy crap.
It's really cool from their standpoint because they zeroed in on the one player, the best player available who would make a giant leap if he got better blocking, and they signed him. But Jordan, they also got DeAndre Swift, right?
Yeah.
And DeAndre Swift is one of the best, if not the best runners in football at not needing good blocking. He had an incredible yard. He was up like more than 6 yards a carry, even when guys didn't block well ahead of him. It's almost like he's insurance if anything goes wrong with the line, an injury, a problem, because Penny's the guy who's going to benefit tremendously from that line. And if for whatever reason the line doesn't work out, Swift's the kind of guy who doesn't need that great blocking. Amazing execution by the Eagles. And you're right about Atlanta. I mean, they have the highest rated center in the league last year. They got 2 great tackles. And what's interesting is that Cordero Patterson and Algier both ran well, even when they didn't get great blocking, but they're getting great blocking. And you're right about Robinson. I mean, you want to get running backs early. He's in a run-heavy offense with great offensive line. What the hell? I'd take him first overall. I really would.
Well, I am holding out hope that the Giants turn into a juggernaut because Evan Neal is no longer a weak link. And if not, well, hey, there's always the Jets. All right, Peter, before we go, I want to tell a little story. It may be an evidence of, sorry, let me start again. All right, Peter, before we go, I want to tell a brief story. It may be a little bit of evidence of gambling gone too far. You be the judge, okay? So as you may or may not have noticed, the Little League World Series is steaming ahead. We're at the end of the regionals and getting ready for teams to go to Williamsport. I'm particularly glued to this because these kids are the same age as my son, and I helped coach my my district team back in June. Anyway, there are really interesting niche communities of people who are very, very, very into Little League that I heard about from someone. And what I found out was that a few years ago, before sports books were up and operating legally in the US, and the betting was confined to offshore overseas sports books, a couple of those books offered lines on Little League World Series games. Wow. And the story I heard from someone is that there was enough of a community of people that knew these teams were sharp beyond sharp. They knew these teams like the back of their hand. They follow it all year. They're super into it. So the way I was put, it was for them, it was like free money. They could bet on these games going back to the regionals, and the books tried to do everything they could, limit their bets. It didn't matter.
These games take place all over the country, right? So we're not just talking about hard-bitten Williamsport locals.
But they know the difference between the best team in Oregon and the second best team in Oregon, or things like that.
How do I know the difference between a team in Rancho Cucamonga and one in Oklahoma City suburb?
Because these subcultures that exist in every walk of life also exist in Little League Baseball. It is a fascinating thing. But I'd heard, from someone that people were making like $8 to $10 grand just betting these Little League games every August. Okay.
I was going to ask you how much money could possibly be at stake. That's too much money.
So what I hear now is that this is dried up, that now that it's legal at the major books, they obviously don't offer this, and the overseas books have stopped offering these numbers. But what I said to someone was, how do people reconcile the difference between, on the one hand, this was like free money for them, and on the other hand, there's a slight moral issue with betting on 12-year-olds playing baseball? Now, the response there was, oh, they're already being exploited by ESPN being on TV all the time, so that ship had sailed. Is that just a rationalization? Is this the most insane thing you've ever heard? Or is that, am I coming down a little too hard on betting on Little League?
Well, first of all, it makes me think we need a list of things we will not, especially here in our third segment of every episode, where we go for wacky stuff sometimes,
right,
where we will not place wagers. Like, I've been scouring the calendar for this time of year, because baseball is the only major sport going, right? And I did not want to find odds on the World Police and Fire games, where the world's policemen and firemen get together. Usually I think some of these games are for charity. I didn't, we should compile a list, like the words you won't put on license plates,
right.
We do need a list of the stuff we will not analyze wagering for. But Jordan, I'm not going to go into it now. We don't have time or really the intent or energy, but once there's revenues enough to put something on TV, who shares in the revenues? How young do you have to be to not share in the revenues of a sport that's generating money for other people? And once that happens, once a sport generates enough money for other people, as your experience proves, the betting markets will get robust. There will be people finding teams in Olympia, Washington to bet on, even though it's youth baseball. Once the markets get that robust, it's hard to stop betting.
On that note, we'll see you back around here next week.